Hello everyone, today is 3rd of November. My name is Sahil and welcome to the newspaper analysis. Now guys, first of all, let's have a look on today's GS folder. So today we will be taking a quote from the Amartya Sen, the Nobel Prize laureate, as well as the author of the famous book Idea of Justice. He had talked about the learning from the adversity. He says that every adversity, every dialectical challenge is potentially a learning experience, but it need not go that way if we refuse to learn. Now this particular quote is very much relevant into the times of the pandemic, as pandemic has taught many a lessons as what needs to be the role of the state. Now guys, if we see the success examples into the state of New Zealand, into the state of Portugal, etc., which had contained the virus, these are those states where the state has been tend to be very much into the welfareism. Even the Germany stands an example into this particular light. So guys, often into the name of the new public management, the state has been receding from the welfareism role, and now into the aftermath of the pandemic, the relevancy of the state has been taught. But at the same time, state needs not to be heavy handed, as it has also been seen that into the name of the surveillance, many of the privacy rights, many of the fundamental rights have also been taken up. So guys, a balanced lesson can be taken up from this adversity, that the state is relevant but the relevancy's order is needed to be taken care of. I hope that I am able to make you clear this particular thing. Guys, this idea is little bit heavy, but please try to understand it. So guys, that's it, and now let's take the newspaper analysis. Now guys, first of all, let's take the overview of the articles that we will be taking up today. Guys, before that, I would like to convey some things. Guys, please do support the initiative. Please do like and comment and share it if you want that the initiative should be continued, because the survival of it depends only on to your support. Now guys, taking up the articles. The first article, now this is the PIB website. Here guys, we can see that the mission Sagar 2 has been mentioned, so we will be seeing it. Then guys, the Malabar 20 has also been mentioned. However, many a times we have discussed this entire Malabar. Then guys, going below, we can see here that the Civil Vigilance Awareness Week has been celebrated, and guys, here a very good initiative has been taken which we can directly utilize in GS4 as well as GS paper number 2. So guys, this is all about the relevant things. Then guys, the other articles we will be taking up from the newspaper. Now this particular article has been taken from the Hindu newspaper, and it mentions the star campaigner and its related Supreme Court observation. Then this particular article I have taken from the Business Standard, and it talks about the McKinsey report with respect to improving manufacturing sector in India. Very good article. Then guys, this particular article has been taken from the Livement, and it is talking about the 14th five-year plan and the lessons that India can learn. Then this particular article has been taken from the Financial Express, and it is talking about the land monetization, and it is actually a very good suggestion. Then guys, this particular article I have taken from the Times of India, and it is talking about the recent amendment which have been done to the FCRA and how the philanthropy has been chalked in India. Then guys, this particular article has been taken from the Hindu newspaper, and it is talking about the nutritional fallout because of the closure of the schools. Then guys, this particular article has also been taken from the Hindu newspaper, and it talks about the fast track courts that have been constituted for the MPs. So guys, that's all about the important news articles, and now let's discuss them in detail. Now, guys, this first article has been taken from the Hindu newspaper, and it is important for our GS paper number 2, the section for polity. Now, guys, here we can see that the Supreme Court had stayed the Election Commission's order with respect to the star campaigner status for the Kamal Nath. Now, guys, we'll be seeing this entire controversy. So, first of all, actually, let's see that what does this star campaigner means. Now, guys, first of all, there is no formal definition for a star campaigner, but star campaigner is a designation which is given by the political parties to some of the campaigners who are very much popular. They might be celebrities, they might be the leaders, or anyone. Now, guys, every recognized political party, it can appoint up to 40 star campaigners, and the registered but unrecognized political parties, they can nominate up to 20 star campaigners. Now guys, when these star campaigners will be going to the rallies, will be doing the campaigning, whatever expenditure will be incurred onto them, that expenditure is actually not included as the election expenditure for a candidate. As guys, you might be knowing that there is a expenditure limit on all the candidates. few days back in our newspaper analysis we had seen that that limit was also increased by 10%. So guys, into the big state assembly elections, a candidate can now spend maximum of 30.8 lakh rupees, whereas for the Lok Sabha elections into the big states he can spend the maximum of the 77 lakh rupees. These limits after the 10% increase. So guys, whatever expenditure will be incurred onto the star campaigner, that expenditure will not be accounted here. And this particular thing is provided into the section number 77 for the Representation of Peoples Act 1951. And guys, it is also important because explicitly in our GS paper number 2, RPA and its provisions have also been mentioned. Now guys, coming into this present controversy, see, you don't need to go into the nitty gritties of this particular case because it is little politically inclined, but I'll tell you what happened. The Kamal Nath, he made some derogatory comments on a female candidate, and guys, it was said that this was done into the violation of the model code of conduct, and therefore the Kamal Nath should be charged onto that particular thing. Now guys, as we are talking about the model code of conduct, it is issued by the election commission when the elections are announced, and it stays into the place up till the election has been concluded. Now the purpose of election, the model code of conduct, is to regulate the political parties and their candidates, and by the virtue of article 324 of the Indian constitution, election commission has the power to supervise the election, and from that thing the MCC is issued. However, at the same time, MCC is not having any statutory backing also. So guys, deriving the power from section article number 324 and MCC, the election commission said that the Kamal Nath had violated the MCC, and therefore his status of a star campaigner is being revoked. Now this particular thing was appealed into the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court had said that election commission has no power to decide that who will be the star campaigner and who will not be the star campaigner. All these particular things are into the hands of the political party, and therefore the election commission has overstepped the mandate. So guys, this is the particular controversy which has now been concluded. Now onto this particular thing, we can infer two things. Number one, guys, we always talk about bringing the integrity into the election campaigns and all these kind of things, and guys, in order to bring such kind of integrity, these kind of steps are very much important, because rather than onto the factual substance, they will provide a symbolism, and therefore it is needed. However, on to the other hand, guys, this thing is also problematic because it might be a kind of an instance also where the ruling government might be abusing the constitutional authority, because selectively the Congress party has been targeted. However, we had seen into the elections that many such kind of speeches and references have been made, but why their action is not being taken? So therefore both the viewpoints are coming into this particular direction. So guys, that's all about this particular article, and now we'll move to the next article. Now, guys, this particular article has been taken from the Business Standard newspaper, and it pertains to a recent observation that has been made by the McKinsey report. Now, guys, McKinsey is a very prestigious kind of source which notes the economic trends. And, guys, you can quote this particular report if you are writing any answer onto the GS paper number 3 onto the economic trends. So, here we will be taking a reference. So, friends, it has been said by the McKinsey that if certain interventions are made with respect to the manufacturing sector in India, then the GDP contribution of the manufacturing sector can be doubled, and it can reach to up to $500 billion into next 7 years. Now, first of all, the segments which they have identified, they are the chemical sector, agricultural and food sector, apparel sector, capital goods and machinery tools sector, and the vehicle components. So these are those sectors which have the huge potential, and 3 type of interventions have been suggested. First of all, they should be given the opportunities to raise their productivity. Second, they should be provided the better know-how and the technology. And third, better access to capital should be provided to them. Now guys, how these particular things can be done? First of all, they should be provided opportunities to involve into the automation. Now automation could be incentivized by giving them the tax breaks. They could be given some kind of rebates with respect to the machinery that they are importing from the overseas, which can be installed and which will be further be promoting the automation. Secondly, guys, infrastructure needs to be built up with respect to the physical infrastructure as well as a digital infrastructure, because it actually determines the productivity of the companies. Now you might be knowing that the China built the successful special economic zones, and the Shenzhen success story is one of the prominent example into this particular regard, as how the availability of infrastructure can play such an important role. Then guys, the know-how and the technology can actually be imbibed by going into the acquisition and collaborations. And into this particular thing, the entry of the foreign companies should be liberalized further so that they can form the meaningful partnerships with the Indian firms. Thirdly, better access to capital needs to be provided. Now guys, the financial reforms are needed into our country, and I here will be giving you a very excellent example. Guys, the example is of the pension funds. So into the overseas countries, particularly into the USA, there the employees, whatever money they are deducting for the pensions, that particular money is invested into the pension fund. Now these pension funds, they have the long gestation period. They are not very impatient kind of funds. So the pension funds from USA, they can be attracted into the India, and that particular money can be invested into the companies, as it will be providing the the money into the foreign denomination. It will be the long term, and it will be onto the comparatively lower interest rate also. So guys, these are certain interventions which should be made, and especially into the present times of economic crisis. So guys, please do utilize it. Apart from this source also, some additional references I have been provided here. So that's all. Now we'll be moving to the next article. Now, guys, this particular article is a very good article. It has been taken from the Live Mint newspaper, and it is talking about the China's new 14th five-year plan that they had announced and what lessons India can learn from it. Now, guys, first of all, the Communist Party of China, it has announced the 14th five-year plan, which will be coming in force from 2021 to 2025. Now, first of all, it happens to be an amusing thing right now that China is still believing into the planning. Though Soviet Union has abandoned the planning, India had abandoned the planning when the Niti Aayog was instituted, but still China believes into the centralized planning. However, guys, when we are talking about the five-year plan of China, then China follows the bottom up approach. It means that from the ground level the inputs are taken, and those inputs are then consolidated and a national plan is formulated. Moreover, guys, the participatory approach has also been taken into this five-year plan, where the citizens via the internet, they were asked their suggestions, and it has been said that their suggestions are also being included. Now guys, the 14th five-year plan of China will formally be adopted into the March 2021 by the National People's Congress, that is the Parliament of China. Now guys, certain goals they have taken into this five-year plan. One by one we will be discussing them. First goal, it has been taken. Go, guys, see this thing. You can see that the date is by till 2025, but their goals have been oriented to a larger goal, and that is till 2035. So guys, first goal here is that by 2035, socialist culture has to be developed into the China. Now this is the first time that any specific growth target like 7% growth, 8% growth has not been taken, but a reference to the socialist culture has been made. Now guys, the socialist culture orients to the more role of the state into the market driven economy. Now guys, the second target which has been taken, it is to make China a moderately developed country. Now into the 13th five-year plan, their target was to make China the moderately prosperous. So from moderately prosperous, they have turned to the moderately developed. Now this moderately developed notion means two things. Number one, the per capita income of the Chinese citizens, it needs to increase up to $30,000. And secondly, their economy will rely now more on to the sustainability, and the green growth will also be there. Then guys, the third, a very important expression has been used, That is the idea of the dual circulation. Now, dual circulation means that the China is also going towards the Atmanirbharta, and they will be less dependent onto the exports. Now, guys, the China has actually realized that internally the production will be done, the circulation will be done, and the consumption will be done. Why the China should depend onto the high pocket Western countries? Because China had found that there are 400 million people within the China whose per capita income is comparable to the Western Europe, and their market size is nearly $6 trillion. So only if to them the products for are made only for them also, then the China will also be getting the much advantages. Now from this particular thing, a lesson also comes for the India. Now guys, this $6 trillion market size is very big, and India if wants can also take a substantial share, because guys, even after the idea of dual circulation, China had said that still $10 trillion worth of goods will be imported, and therefore the India can play an important role here. But for that particular thing, our diplomatic relations, our economic relations with the China needs to be very much careful. Then guys, the next target that the China has taken, that their emphasis will be now onto the technology. For example, the artificial intelligence, 5G electronic vehicles, on it they will be focusing. Guys, you might have heard that China has always been called as the hub of the cheap manufacturing. Now they want to remove this cheap manufacturing tag, and they want to go into the sophisticated technology driven sectors. So there they will be going further. Guys, the China has also gave the idea of go west. Now this go west means that there are certain areas into the China which have not been developed or are very less developed, such as the region of the Tibet and the region of the Xinjiang. So here China will also be focusing, and their demography, their resources will be developed further more. Now guys, if we see the China's performance onto their 5-year plans, China has been comparatively very much successful. And this particular example I can give you, because into last 30 years China had substantially reduced their absolute poverty. Now according to the World Bank, the $2 per day is the poverty line, and just 30 years back 40% people were falling below this poverty line, and now only 1% people are there into the China who are below the poverty line. So actually guys, China is not a democracy, it has a single party system, there are no dissenters, and into this particular thing all the Chinese claims can be achieved. Now guys, India has to see that how India will be responding to this particular thing. India also needs to streamline its economic response when we see the China's economic response that they had given into the form of the 14th 5-year plan. So guys, on to the comparative basis, please do give a comparison if the planning in India is being concerned. So that's it. Now we'll be moving to the next article. Now, guys, this particular article has been taken from the Financial Express newspaper, and it is exploring the idea of the monetization of the land. Now see guys, if we see into the present times, the urban revenues, they have been very much low. Now not only into the present times, but always the urban revenues have been very much low. And at the same time, there is large tracts of urban land which is a tangible asset, which is very lucrative asset, but it is lying vacant. These lands are not being utilized up to their fullest potential. Now guys, these large lands are with two people. One is the public sector undertakings, and other are the urban local bodies. Therefore it is being said that both PSUs and urban local bodies, they should monetize their land. It means that they develop their land in such a way that they can be leased out, they can be given on to the rent, as actually it will be bringing much more benefits. What benefits will be coming, will be seeing here. So guys, first of all, the land monetization will bring the revenue, and from this particular revenue, various developmental plans of the urban areas can be executed. Secondly guys, it will also lead to the better resource mobilization. See, into the cities always the land is a constraining factor, and because of the lack of the land, the proper urbanization is not being executed, there are no proper spaces for the industrializations and all such kind of thing. So therefore, if the land which has been just lying vacant, if it will be put to more productive uses, it will lead to the better resource mobilization, and it has also been provided explicitly in our GS paper number 3. Then guys, the real estate prospects into the vicinity will also improve. Now just assume that there is a big tract of land, and into the nearby areas there are other real real estate properties. Now if this piece of land is undeveloped, these properties are also not having the good market value. But if we develop this particular land into some full-fledged market complex, or into an industrial hub, or onto it into a kind of a service hub, then guys, all these areas will also develop, their prospects will improve, the living conditions of the people here will be improving, there will be much more developers which will show interest in developing the peripheral properties also. Now guys, by using this particular land, the demand for the social infrastructure can also be met. Always we see that there is a lack of hospitals, there is a lack of schools, colleges. So by using this particular land, the social infrastructure can also be built upon it. Then guys, I had already talked that it will be providing the scope to the planned urbanization. It will improve the infrastructure, tourism potential of a city will be improved, and the quality of life as a whole will further be improved. So guys, it has been said that on to the urgent basis, all the vacant lands which are there, they should be mapped, and a repository of these lands should be made, and onto the PPP model those lands should be developed. Why onto the PPP model? Because guys, into the PPP model, the interest of both the public as well as private is reflected. Now guys, the public interest means that how the welfareist notion can be brought, that thing will be included, and the private actually knows that how this particular entire project can be made commercially viable. So commercial viability will come, public interest will come. Then guys, it has been said that though there is a problem into the monetization of land and the development of land, and that is the time consuming approval process which has to be taken from the large number of civic authorities which are there into the urban regions. So guys, government should come out with such a kind of a portal, or with such kind of a mechanism, that multiple civic organizations are not to be dealt, but there needs to be a consolidated one stop approval. Now guys, there is one excellent case study also which has been given, and that is the case study of the RLDA, that is the Rail Land Development Authority. Now this is a nodal agency under the railways, which had actually identified that 43,000 hectare of land is lying idle with the railways, and this vacant land will be developed by the Rail Land Development Authority, and 79 sites they had already identified which will be leased to third parties so that they can develop it. So guys, now this is a time that we should recognize that such huge asset into the name of the urban land is lying vacant, and we need to explore it. Now guys, this particular article will also be important for the GS paper number 2, where the mobilization of resources up to the local level has also been mentioned. So guys, that's all about this particular article, and now we'll be moving to the next article. Now guys, this particular article I have taken from the Times of India newspaper, and this article is actually exploring the recent amendments that have been made to the FCRA and how this particular thing is problematic. Now this topic is important for our GS paper number 2, where the NGOs have been mentioned. Now, starting with the article. So guys, the emergency has been called as the tragedy of modern India, and all the actions which have been taken into the times of emergency, they have been ridiculed. So a question comes that why then the FCRA, that is the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, which came during the time of emergency, it is not being abandoned? Why government still is fascinated with it? Now guys, recently the amendments have been made in FCRA which has actually proved to make this act more draconian. First of all friends, if you don't know anything about this FCRA, I will tell you. FCRA is a legislation which actually regulates the foreign donations or foreign fundings. Now guys, by the FCRA, all the NGOs which are raising the money from the foreign sources, they have to take a approval under FCRA. They need to certify that that money will not be utilized for any anti-India interest. Now guys, actually it has been said that the recent amendments to FCRA had chalked the philanthropy in India. We'll be seeing how. Now guys, first amendment which have been brought, it is with respect to the transfer of funds. Now it has been provided that if any NGO is receiving the money, it cannot decentralize that money to any other organizations. Now how this particular thing will be problematic? See guys, just assume that there is one very big NGO it had received money, and now they want to use this particular money to eradicate the hunger in India, or they had just found some particular way to improve the learning outcomes of the student. Now this particular NGO cannot go in all the villages of India, rather it will identify some of the good NGOs which are actually working at the grassroots level, and it will actually transfer the money to them so that they can actually spread that good education or can elevate the hunger. Now if you will ban the transfer of such money, how this particular thing will be possible? Now guys, I would like to give you here a very good reference from the time of the Green Revolution. Now guys, there were two organizations, that is the Rockefeller Organization of USA and the Ford Foundation. Now both of them actually identified that how by using the hybrid varieties of high yielding variety seeds, the agriculture can be enhanced, and they perfected this particular thing into the Mexico. And after it, they actually transferred the money, the grants, to various grassroots organizations. In India also, the Rockefeller had provided such funding to various NGOs at the grassroots level. Now a question comes that if today Green Revolution would have to be carried, this particular thing would not have been possible into the face of the newly introduced amendments. Moreover guys, we know that right now we are facing the pandemic, and there are large number of NGOs which are involved into the relief work, and even the Prime Minister has appreciated them. Now these NGOs are not generating their money, rather they are also getting the money from various foreign sources. So how they will be doing the relief work? And the consequences now has been reached to such that there are thousands of NGOs which are on to the verge of the closure. Then guys, the second amendment we will be seeing. So second amendment is with respect to certain limitation onto the expenditure limit. It has been said that maximum of 20% of the expenditure an organization can do onto the overhead or onto the administrative works. Now see, there are large number of NGOs which are not actually doing the groundwork, rather they are developed on training the communities or into building the capacities of the communities. For example, there are NGOs which are doing the research, which are training the civil servants, which are training the people to teach. So obviously all their work or all their money which is being spent, it is for the training, and it is a kind of an administrative expense only. So how they will be functioning? Then guys, further, these are the major amendments which are the bone of contention. Then further guys, it has been said that in India, if we see the structure, it is like such. There is the Foreign Exchange Management Act, that is the FEMA. Now under the FEMA, if any person or any individual or any industry is receiving the money, they will be regulated, and the regulation will be done by the finance minister. Now if the finance ministry is regulating the individual funding, why the home ministry is actually seeing the funding for the philanthropy via the FCRA? The problem is this, that home ministry is for maintaining the law and order, and always the attitude of the home ministry is such that they see everything under the lens of suspicion, and the same thing is being done into the case of the NGOs. However, a counter reason has also been provided here. It has been said that home ministry is included so that it can see that the money is not being used for the terrorism. But for that also there is a counter, that what then will FATF will be doing? So guys, it has been said that actually into the name of controlling high heavy handedness has been adopted into the case of NGO. Moreover guys, actually home ministry is also not that much relevant into this case. It has been suggested by the article, because there are various other existing controls also. For example, under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, they can be controlled. The charities commissioner is there, registrar of companies is there. Moreover, they also need to present their accounts under the IT Act. So guys, it has been said that NGOs are being chalked, and by chalking the NGOs, the philanthropy is being chalked in India. It has been now suggested that there is needed to be have an external regulator for the NGOs or the money that they are receiving. In 2019, the finance ministry provided a very good kind of an idea. They said that a transparent social stock exchange will be created in India, where the social enterprises and volunteer organizations can list them. So guys, the such kind of an idea should be explored now, and into the name of the control, the genuine efforts should not be strangulated. So guys, this is all about this particular article. A very good insight has been given here, and now we'll be moving to the next article. Now guys, This particular article, it has been taken from the Hindu newspaper, and it is talking about the nutritional fallout due to the closure of the schools. Now, before starting this particular article, we will quote certain reports. First report is the State of Food Security and Nutrition in World 2020 report, also popularly called as the SOFI report. According to this report, it has been said that nearly 369 million children in India around the month of April, they were losing out their school meals, and substantial children out of this 369 million, they are into India. Now, guys, according to Global Hunger Index, which has also been released just a few days back, India has ranked 94 out of 107 countries onto the hunger index, and therefore it is into the serious category. So these two reports, they reflect that what is the stage of hunger in the India. Now, when we are talking about the hunger for the children's, midday meal scheme has done a very good work. Now, guys, according to the government of India's notification, under the midday meal scheme, 450 kilocalories of energy, at least 12 gram of protein, and micronutrients such as iron, folic acid, and vitamin A are to be provided to the children. Now, this is a very good thing, and actually such kind of food intake, it accounts to near 1 by third of the daily food intake for our children. Now, guys, according to a report by the Joint Review Mission for the Midday Meal Scheme 2015 and 16, it has been said that substantial number of children actually they reach empty stomach onto the school, and therefore the midday meal scheme becomes even more relevant. But friends, if you see today, the schools have been closed, and as the school have been closed, midday meal scheme has also been virtually closed. Though into the month of March, Government of India said that even after the school closure, the hot cooked meal or the dry ration will be provided so that the children don't stay hungry. But this particular thing has actually not been implemented till today, and this particular thing can be articulated by the data which we can take from the Food Corporation of India. Now, according to FCI, the offtake or the food grain that is being taken for the implementation of the midday meal scheme, that offtake has been 22% lower for the month of April and May when we compared it to the data for 2019. And then specifically the state of Bihar is one such state which had not taken any food grain for the midday meal scheme into the month of April and May. So obviously it denotes that children are under the food hunger and they are under the severe pressure. And guys, if they are continue to same into this particular thing, they will not have any option. Rather, they need to take up the menial jobs. They need to work so that they can afford the diet for at least two times. And this particular thing has actually been depicted by the ILO as well as by the UNICEF, where they had said that actually the children have started to work as laborers, and now large number of children might not even be returning to the school even after the lockdown has been finished and the pandemic has been over. So guys, into this particular line, now it is a time that government onto the lines of Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan should start the Atmanirbhar Poshan Abhiyan, where guys, what can be done? The small farmers, they can be linked with the midday meal scheme. These small farmers can provide the cereals, eggs, and vegetables, which can in return be provided to the children. Because in India, there is also a big problem of the hidden hunger. That means that children are getting the food, but their diet is not adequate. And there, if we supplement the diet with these things, it can solve the problem of the hidden hunger, and at the same time, the small farmers will also get the adequate remuneration for their products. Moreover, guys, the kitchen gardens should also be established where the organically raised food crops, or the sorry vegetable and the fruits can be raised, and these local fresh fruits and vegetables can also be provided as a part of diet. So guys, the idea of Atmanirbhar Poshan is very much relevant into the present times and should be taken up further. So guys, that's all. Can we utilize this entire idea in GS paper number 2 under the topics of the hunger? So that's it. Now we'll be moving to the next article. Now, guys, this particular article has been taken from the Hindu newspaper, and it is actually talking about the recent Madras High Court's observation which it has made with respect to the special courts which have been constituted. Now, what had happened? The special courts have been made to try the cases onto the MPs and MLAs. Now, the Madras High Court says that this special provision for the court is going against the constitutional validity. There needs to be the courts which are needed to be offense centric and not the offender centric. So if for example the sexual assault, there could be a separate court; for the money laundering there could be a separate court, but for a special category of citizens there cannot be a special court. Now guys, if I tell you here, it has been said that the MPs and MLAs who are committing certain offenses under the POXO Act, that is the Protection of Children from the Sexual Offences Act, or if they have done some crime under the Prevention of the Corruption Act, Narcotics, Drug and Psychotropic Substance Act, then there are special courts which are made under those specific acts, and there the people are tried. So it has been said that the MPs and MLAs should be tried for their offenses under the special courts which has been constituted. It has been said that there need not to be the offender centric in courts, that is the courts directed only for the MP and MLAs. For offense centric courts can be there. So guys, it is just their observation. Now guys, if we see, actually there have been many number of reports which had actually said that there are large number of cases which are lying pending for the decades where the legislators are involved. Guys, if I tell you, there are 4400 criminal trials which are pending against the legislators, and out of these 4400, 2500 cases are such where the sitting legislators are involved. So guys, seeing this particular thing, the separate court do makes a sense. But guys, anyhow, this is the observation which has been made by the Madras High Court, and we also have to consider this particular thing. So guys, this is all about this particular thing. However, there are certain technicalities and nitty-gritties which we don't need to go. So with respect to the UPSC, we need to see the major trend which is going on into this particular direction. So guys, that's all about this particular article, and now we'll be moving to the next article. Now guys, this particular news item has been taken from the Press Information Bureau, and it is mentioning about the mission Sagar 2. Now, such kind of missions have sometimes asked into the UPSC exam, so we will be seeing it with respect to the prelims. Now guys, the mission Sagar 2 is a kind of a assistance program by the government of India, which is being coordinated by the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of External Affairs, and various other similar organizations. Now, under this Mission Sagar 2, the countries such as the Sudan, South Sudan, Djibouti, and the Eritrea, they will be provided the food assistance, because right now they are facing the various natural calamities as well as the present pandemic, and the virus induced problems are also there. So, food is being provided. Now, guys, why the Mission Sagar 2? Because already there have been the Mission Sagar into the month of the May and June, and at under this Mission Sagar, the countries such as the Maldives, Mauritius, Seychelles, Madagascar, and Comoros, they were provided the food at that point of time, and now this is the Mission Sagar which is centered onto this particular countries. Now guys, this Mission Sagar 2, it is a kind of an outcome of Prime Minister of India's Sagar, which stands for the security and growth for all in the region. Now guys, Sagar is an outreach program where India is trying to improve the relations with the maritime neighbors, and it is strengthening the existing bond, because into the Pacific region India wants to expedite or enhance its clout. So the Sagar is an outreach program, and the countries are being helped here. Now guys, it can also be utilized when you are writing as how India is responding into the region of the Indian Ocean, and there you can provide it. So guys, that's it. Now we'll move to the next article. Now guys, this particular news article has been taken from the PIB, and it can be utilized as a reference if you are writing any question onto the GS paper number 4 into the topics of the integrity as well as the corruption. There, the case study can be given from here. Now, what has happened? We have seen earlier also that now the DARPG, that is the Department for Administrative Reforms and the Public Grievances, it is celebrating the Vigilance Awareness Week, where it was to be brainstormed that how the civil vigilance can be increased, corruption can be reduced, and how a culture of the transparency, integrity can be induced into the government organizations. Now, guys, into this particular thing, the kind of a deliberations happened, and it has been concluded, and the DARPG has actually adopted an ideas box onto the good governance in a pandemic, where everybody can give certain suggestions as how good governance can be instilled. Now, guys, this particular portal has went live onto the website of the DARPG as well as onto the MyGov platform. There we can give the suggestion. So, guys, apart from providing this as a reference, there are certain other references also which has been given into the address which was given here by the Dr. Jitendra Singh, that is the Minister of State for the Personal Public Grievance and the Pensions. So Dr. Jitendra Singh, he had said that government has done substantial work in reduction of the corruption. For example, the Prevention of Corruption Act has been amended, which was not amended since last 30 years, and it has actually made corruption much more punishable, and a culture of transparency has been instilled by it. After that, guys, it has also been said that the interviews have been abolished for the class C and the class D jobs, because there the interviews were used for the arbitrary purposes. Moreover, guys, it has also been said that the Lokpal has actually been made functional in 2018, because we had seen that there was no chairman for the Lokpal for so many of the years. Then, guys, it has been said that the National Recruiting Agency has also been made, which will conduct the common eligible test and will provide a level playing field for the employment opportunities at the lower level of jobs. So, guys, these are certain things which have also been said here, and these examples we can actually utilize if a question comes that how government is responding to control the nuisance of the corruption into the present times. Moreover, guys, there is also the adoption of policy, that is the zero tolerance to corruption. So this is also a kind of a resolve that has been shown by the government. Moreover, guys, the round table conference onto the Satark Bharat, Samriddh Bharat has also taken, where it has been discussed that how the vigilant India will lead to the prosperous India. So, guys, that's all about this particular news. I hope that you have found much substance here which you can directly utilize it into your answers. So, guys, that's all for the initiative. Thank you so much.